It is the afternoon of November 25, 1941, off Egypt's western desert coast. Aboard HMS Barham, the sea is smooth, the ship is in routine order and men off watch have come up for a brief walk on the forecastle. On the Admiral's bridge stands Vice Admiral Pridham Whipple and his staff. Around them, the battleships Queen Elizabeth and Valiant steam in formation with destroyers guarding the flanks. But somewhere beneath the surface, a sound contact had been missed. A German submarine is inside the screen, and Barham is coming up right across its sides. On November 18, 1941, the British 8th Army opened Operation Crusader from Sidi Barrani, Egypt. The offensive struck towards Axis forces in the Western Desert, while the Commonwealth garrison at Tobruk remained a central pressure point. German and Italian forces fought stubbornly, but the British attack pushed them back, and the threat to Rommel's supply line became urgent. The German response widened the crisis at sea. Hitler declared an emergency, and the German Navy was ordered to make every effort to save Rommel's Afrika Korps. The priority was clear: the attacks on Rommel's supply ships had to be stopped. Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, head of the German Navy, and the German Naval High Command, the OKM, then committed every available U-boat of the Atlantic Operational Force to the Mediterranean task. 50 U-boats were earmarked to support Rommel, with 12 Type 7 submarines assigned to the eastern Mediterranean and 30 more to the western Mediterranean or the approaches to Gibraltar. The British saw the movement developing and moved to block it. RAF Coastal Command increased patrols in the Bay of Biscay with radar-equipped aircraft based in southwest England and Gibraltar. British Command also transferred radar-equipped escorts from the North Atlantic to Gibraltar. A Swordfish squadron from the lost aircraft carrier Ark Royal shifted to a land base at Gibraltar. Only days earlier, Ark Royal had been torpedoed by U-81 and lost while returning towards Gibraltar. Her sinking left the British Mediterranean forces without a fleet carrier available to replace her. Escorts and aircraft then patrolled the strait day and night, trying to prevent more U-boats from entering the Mediterranean. But the barrier had not closed in time. U-81 and 205 were already operating in the area, and more boats had begun slipping through the strait. The repair and refit facilities at Salamis and La Spezia were not fully operational, and delays limited how many could be used at once. The first to sail on a second Mediterranean patrol from Salamis was U-331, commanded by 28-year-old Hans Diedrich von Tiesenhausen. Before returning to patrol work, his submarine was sent to land a 7-man party of Brandenburg commandos near the Egyptian coast to blow up the coastal railway line. The commandos were put ashore, but the operation failed, and all of the men were taken. By late November, the same pressure that had drawn the German U-boats into the Mediterranean was also pulling British heavy ships out of Alexandria. HMS Barham, an old Queen Elizabeth-class battleship and veteran of Jutland, was now flagship of the 1st Battle Squadron. She had been through much of the Mediterranean War. Damaged off Britain early in the conflict, hit during operations off Dakar, used in convoy cover present at the Battle of Cape Matapan, and damaged again by German aircraft during the evacuation of Crete. After repairs, she had been returned to a fleet still being used to cover cruiser operations against Axis supply traffic. Towards the end of November, the Mediterranean fleet faced another supply problem. There was evidence that 2 enemy convoys were being sent from Italy to Benghazi to reinforce the Afrika Korps. Admiral Sir Andrew Cunningham, Commander-in-Chief of the Mediterranean Fleet, ordered the 7th and 15th Cruiser Squadrons to sea to intercept and destroy them. The cruisers would make the hunt in the central Mediterranean. The heavy ships would stand farther back, ready to cover them. Late in the afternoon on November 24th, the battle fleet sailed from Alexandria. The force included Queen Elizabeth, flagship of Cunningham, Barham, flagship of Vice Admiral Sir Henry Pridham Whipple, under Captain Geoffrey Cook, and Valiant. They were to hold back and give the cruiser squadrons heavy gun cover, while the cruisers ran the interception ahead. Aboard Barham was the squadron signal officer, Flag Lieutenant Ian Hunter MacDonald. The account he wrote years later preserves what that day looked like from the Admiral's Bridge. After leaving Alexandria, there were air raid warnings and reports of enemy aircraft shadowing the fleet, but nothing of consequence followed. At the same time, the German submarine was submerged near the British naval base at Alexandria. Von Tiesenhausen's hydrophone operator reported heavy screws. The submarine began to move down the bearing.
This episode is sponsored by Hungry Minds, an international creative group behind the book The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding Civilization. It is a beautifully illustrated book about the inventions, discoveries, and systems that shaped human history. Not just kings and battles, but the foundations beneath civilization itself. Agriculture, engineering, medicine, navigation, communication, energy, materials, and much more. What I like is that this book makes civilization feel tangible. It is not just about abstract ideas or distant inventions, but about the things we still depend on every day: tools, food, shelter, materials, and the knowledge behind them. Across more than 400 pages, 180 topics, and 23 chapters, Hungry Minds combines science, history, art, and design with illustrations that feel part engineering sketch, part medieval manuscript. It is also a premium hardcover book, so it works very well as a gift. And there is a rabbit hole inside it too, hidden reference symbols, and even an interactive quest. No spoilers, but it is the kind of book you keep coming back to. Check the link in the description and use the code HOH10 for 10% off. It supports the channel, and it makes a genuinely great gift.
On the afternoon of November 25th, the Mediterranean Fleet Battle Squadron was west of Egypt. Queen Elizabeth, Barham, and Valiant were steering west at 17 knots while zigzagging. Barham was on the port leg of her zigzag, the side the submarine was about to come up on. They were screened by 8 destroyers against submarine attack. By the early afternoon, MacDonald was on the Admiral's Bridge, with the Admiral and several staff officers nearby. Hands had been piped to tea, and off-watch engine room artificers and stoker petty officers had come up to the forecastle on their usual first dog-watch walk. Nearby, U-331 had followed the bearing up to periscope depth and found the British battle line ahead, Queen Elizabeth, Barham, and Valiant, with destroyers around them. Von Tiesenhausen first set up on Queen Elizabeth, the leading battleship. She passed clear, and Tiesenhausen was forced to shift to the next ship in line. That ship was Barham, closing rapidly. In the periscope, she filled the view so completely that he could not identify her. At 16:18, the destroyer Jarvis, one of the leading ships in the screen, gained an ASDIC contact. The range was an estimated 900 to 1100 yards. The contact spread across an angle of 40 to 60 degrees, far wider than expected for a submarine, and it was dismissed as a non-submarine echo, believed to be the wake of a ship ahead. U-331 passed through the screen, probably between Jarvis and Griffin. The destroyers did not attack, and the submarine was now inside the screen on Barham's port side. At 16:25, Tiesenhausen fired all 4 bow torpedo tubes at a range of about 375 meters, roughly 410 yards. As the torpedoes left the tube, the submarine briefly broached the surface. Before leaving the bridge, MacDonald said he saw the conning tower of a submarine about 150 yards from Barham's port side. It remained exposed for perhaps half a minute before diving again. One of Barham's pom-poms engaged it, but without result. There was almost no time to register the attack, and Barham had no time to evade. 3 of the 4 torpedoes struck her port side in rapid succession. Concentrated between the funnel and the after turrets, The hits were so close together that they rose as a single great column of water. The submarine then went down, out of control, plunging to an indicated 265 meters, around 870 feet, before she steadied, far past her design depth of about 150 meters, roughly 490 feet, and into water deep enough to crush the hull, but she held together. Barham was dead, still carrying way from her earlier speed. Within seconds, the list became more severe. Barham continued rolling to port until she reached more than 20 degrees. Then, she seemed to hang there for about a minute, caught between recovery and capsizing. But she did not recover. The roll continued. Barham went over to her side and water could be seen entering the funnel. A moment later, a magazine exploded in the after part of the ship, above the main mast. The later Board of Inquiry traced it to fire in a 4-inch magazine that reached the main 15-inch magazine alongside. The blast vented upward through the upper deck and sideways through the starboard side. The sinking was filmed from nearby Valiant by cameraman John Turner. As Barham rolled over, the camera kept running. When the smoke cleared, the battleship had disappeared. She had sunk in roughly 4 minutes. 56 officers and 806 ratings were killed, including Captain Cook, who went down with his ship. About 450 men survived. The destroyer Hotspur picked up 337 of them, including Vice Admiral Pridham Whipple, and the Australian destroyer Nizam recovered the others. U-331 was not attacked by the escorting destroyers. Tiesenhausen did not hear or see the full result of his attack as the submarine escaped. Barham was the second battleship an U-boat had sunk after Royal Oak, and she was the first to be lost at sea. The Royal Navy's misfortune did not stop there. Within weeks, the fleet's 2 remaining battleships, Queen Elizabeth and Valiant, were crippled by Italian frogmen in the Alexandria harbour, leaving Cunningham's surface force gutted. At home, the Board of Admiralty censored all news of Barham's sinking, partly to conceal it from Germany and partly to protect British morale. They held back the formal announcement for weeks. The next of kin were told before the public, but their letters carried a warning not to discuss the loss beyond close relatives, since the enemy did still not know for certain that Barham was gone. Even so, the secret did not hold completely. A medium, Helen Duncan, claimed at a séance to have contacted drowned Barham sailors while the loss was still hidden. She later became the last person jailed under the Witchcraft Act of 1735. On the German side, the result stayed uncertain. That night, Tiesenhausen reported only that he had torpedoed a battleship, with the outcome unknown. And without confirmation, Dönitz treated the attack cautiously. Only after the British announcement on January 27, 1942, did he learn that Barham had sunk, and Tiesenhausen was awarded the Ritterkreuz that day. Tiesenhausen's luck held just a year. The boat that had slipped clean away from Barham was crippled by aircraft off Algiers on November 17, 1942. And when she signaled surrender, a torpedo bomber sank her before it could be taken up. 32 of her crew died. Tiesenhausen was one of the 17 who lived, and he spent the rest of the war as a prisoner. Back in the last week of November 1941, the U-boat movement into the Mediterranean showed no sign of stopping. 10 more boats were heading for the Strait of Gibraltar.
Thank you for watching this video. You can find the ultimate guide to rebuilding civilization through the link in the description. If you enjoy history, science, or beautifully made books, it is worth checking out for yourself, and it also makes a genuinely great gift for someone with a curious mind. Use my code HOH10 for 10% off, and thanks to Hungry Minds for sponsoring and supporting House of History. Thank you so much for watching this documentary. Please consider leaving a like as it allows more people to discover House of History. And if there's a battle topic or event you would like to know more about, consider leaving your thoughts in a comment. I also want to thank all my Patreons for their generous support. If you do enjoy House of History and you want to support my work, consider joining me on Patreon. For just $1 per month, you will already receive early access to all my videos without any in-video advertisements. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.